When I was in my 20s, there was a rectangular shape worn into the back pocket of all of my jeans. And it wasn't a wallet. It was a little notebook. And I'm going to try to convince you over the next few minutes that my little notebook may be a key to changing the world. Has this ever happened to you? You're young and single, or you remember when you were young and single, and you're at a party and there are intelligent and attractive people there, and you find yourself in a conversation and someone mentions a book, and it's one that you haven't read. The key decision moment is, do you put on that thoughtful, nodding face that suggests you know what everybody's talking about for just a moment and hope that they change the subject? Anyway, I bring up that awkward thought because that was happening to me quite a bit in my 20s, and so it forced me to write down the names of each of these books in my guilty book list in my little notebook in my back pocket. And it's kind of a sad little story, but I'm confessing it to you today because I'd like to describe the beginning of my seriously falling in love with stories, and how a filmmaker for 20 years would start to think that they were connected somehow to what's wrong with the way that we teach, and why understanding them better can change the world. Kind of a leap, so bear with me. There is a language that I've noticed that is widely understood, spoken by only a few, relatively speaking. It is used worldwide and has no name. The people who invented this language were a small group of influential people, and they had no intention of doing this. Griffith, Keaton, Chaplin, Eisenstein, and a handful of others. Of course, I'm talking about the language of film, the language of cinema, the language of images presented and taken away, the language of light and dark, fast and slow, thunder and silence. When you hold a close-up on a character, even though the other character is now speaking, that has meaning. If you refrain from using close-ups, and then you suddenly do, that has meaning. If you've accumulated a very busy soundtrack and then allow silence to occur, that has meaning. It's the most amazing way to convey complex ideas and emotions. And when it affects dozens or hundreds or thousands or millions of people at the same time, in the same way, its power is breathtaking. And the thing is, we understand it intuitively. Children watching their first TV show understand it. People in a remote village that hardly ever gets movies, they understand it. And it has no name. The thing that I think is most interesting is how it can inform us on the best way to sequence a story. Let me give you an example. Newspaper reporters in certain markets. Now, these are people who are highly developed in their sense of story. They're being encouraged to take video cameras with them when they research a story, so that the publisher hopefully can put together something that posts on the website as a companion to their story as a video piece. I was asked to give some filmmaking tips to a group of reporters, and I focused on framing and getting decent audio and the trick of making sure that you get your interview first so that the interview will tell you what other stuff you need to shoot, that kind of thing. And a couple of weeks later, one of the reporters contacted me and asked if I would review a video that she had made. And I was happy to do that. And it told the story of a nonprofit that works with senior citizens. And it moved on to another story about a volunteer who works for that nonprofit, a young man. And then it closed with a section about an elderly gentleman who receives some of the benefits of that nonprofit through this volunteer. It's perfectly logical, and it's absolutely anti-story in the cinematic sense. The thing is, this reporter completely knows how to tell this story in words, but she was thrown by this task of assembling a video. So I said to her, you shot all the right things, and you just assembled it upside down. The cinematic story is, there's an elderly gentleman. Now, who is this, and why are we telling a story about him? Why do we care about him? Well, it looks like he lives alone and has some mobility problems, and he can't even take his trash out to the street. And then there's a knock at the door, and a young man shows up. He's taking the trash out. Well, who is this? Is this his grandson? Is this a neighbor? He doesn't seem to live next door. No, he gets in his car and takes off, and it looks at, he turns out he works for the nonprofit. He's a volunteer. Oh, I see why you told us this story this way. Well, the thing is, we think of a good storyteller as a master of conveying information. And sometimes I think it's helpful to think of them as masters of withholding information, making us want the next part, bit by bit, making us ask questions like, who is this guy, and why did he just do that? Where's the story going? There is something that screenwriters use that's one of the ways that they remind themselves and clarify for themselves the classic three-act structure that they are working within. Act 1, does anybody know this? Chase your protagonist up a tree. Meaning, set something in motion that is really going to have to get straightened out. Act 2, throw rocks at him. Meaning, make sure that the situation gets more and more complex and more urgent. Act 3, get him down. This means whatever that situation was, you need to resolve it. You need to get that straightened out. It's silly, but it's amazing how stories yearn for this shape. I stumbled upon a piece of this puzzle, then the way it relates to education, years ago, quite by accident, and it was an amazing opportunity to witness the consistent and methodical creation of intense desire in students, desire to know what comes next, in a very dramatic way. I started something called the Filmmakers Bootcamp in 1998. I wanted to see if there's a better way to teach this amazing medium. And the bootcamp essentially turns film instruction on its head. If the old paradigm, the existing paradigm, is lecture and screening and independent study, that is the part where the students try to edit and shoot. The bootcamp paradigm is start shooting as soon as possible. The instructor is always on set, and you always allow for the opportunity that the making of the film is the classroom all the way through. My thinking is, if I want to get a filmmaker to understand that he should be using his dramatic analysis of a scene to figure out where the camera should go, there's no better time for this than when he's actually on set trying to figure out where the camera should go with the actors and crew waiting. Why separate theory and practice by such a wide margin when you can actually have this learning moment occur at the same time? You're learning the why at the same time as the how. Something was going on at these boot camps that had nothing to do with filmmaking, and I would tell my friends this, but I was having a little trouble articulating it. I could tell that these students were internalizing a whole bunch of complex information in a way that was deep and fast, I guess is all I can say. And so I privately started calling it teaching in the moment of greatest desire. And I got to tell you, I felt so special with that little phrase rattling around in my brain. I thought I'd really sort of saved the world there. And it took about 12 years for someone to actually kindly and gently point out to me that it already had a name, which is project-based learning. So what do you want? I was a movie guy. So what does this have to do with the language with no name? Basically this, that project-based learning and these boot camps are shaped like a story. Okay, this is project-based learning. Give your students a task to accomplish, which to me is the same thing as chase your protagonist up a tree. Let them discover the problems that will inevitably surface is exactly the same as throw rocks at them. Guide them over the finish line and let them see how they did is the same as get him down. Now, the thing that was revelation to me about this was that it really wasn't about me being so awesome, which is so sad. And it wasn't like there was this magical thing that I had done to the curriculum, that I prepared it in such a way that was having this deep impact. No, it's just in the setup. It's the shape of the delivery mechanism. It's automatically compelling because it's shaped like a story, and so it creates desire. Every student filmmaker's project is chased up a tree, has had rocks thrown at it, and has gotten down from that tree several times each day, over and over and over. Because the thing is, we always want to know what happens next. We love stories. In fact, we love stories so much that I have this conviction that if we could get all of our educators just a little bit more fluent in the language with no name, that things would start to change really quickly. Let me give you an example. There's something going on in education that I'm a little nervous about. Middle school and high school teachers are offering their students certain assignments that they can do as videos or as papers. And it's to satisfy the requirement that they employ differentiated learning modes. The kids who have an intuitive sense of the language with no name will raise their hand. And we assume, well, that's because they enjoy it. And that's partially true. The darker secret hiding inside that, I believe, is that they also know that they will get a better grade. And why would they get a better grade? Because their teacher has no idea how to grade this. This is a bad thing. The delicate balance between teacher and student, that little skosh of respect, hinges on precarious things like this. And we need to give our teachers the upper hand so that they can seize these open-ended, wonderful teaching moments when they occur, when the teacher can see that they have created a great desire to learn. There's a moment that I picture in our near future when a teacher is working with a student on a little video, and the teacher is saying this: Alex, I've looked at your project a couple of times, and I want to show you something. Right here on this cut, you cut to that wide shot from the doorway. I don't think you meant to. You're changing from the subjective voice to the objective voice. Remember, we talked about this when we were writing essays, that as long as we were in those close-ups and that medium shot that you had, we were confident about whose story this is, the story of those two characters. And then when you cut out here to the doorway, it raises the question, well, whose story is this? Is there someone watching from the doorway? Now, I just got to tell you, when I picture that conversation happening, it's not a film teacher talking, it's not a media specialist in some charter school, it's a 7th grade social studies teacher in a public classroom using a better knowledge of the language with no name to turn her kids into exceptional communicators. That's inviting them to accept the gift of an understanding of how we communicate and putting it right in their back pockets. And maybe, tucked in that back pocket, it can ignite a desire for powerful communication, for exceptional storytelling, like it did for me. Listen, the funny thing about the language with no name, if you watch some television, if you've gone to a handful of movies, if you have sat through one compelling presentation at a conference, you already know it. You just don't know that you know it. But if we really learn it, we can tell a story. If we can tell a story, we can create desire. If we can create desire, we can teach effectively. And if we can teach effectively, we can change the world. Thank you.